Welcome to Uncharted Hearts, a channel dedicated to exploring the unexpected paths our lives can take after everything we thought we knew has changed. We tell stories about second chances, unconventional connections, and the brave, often quiet, decisions we make to find happiness again. If you believe that love and connection can appear when we least expect them, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Your support helps us share these deeply human and hopeful narratives. Today's story is about a woman navigating the quiet, lonely aftermath of a divorce, and how an unexpected houseguest changed the entire landscape of her world. Before we begin, let me ask you, do you believe that meaningful connections have an age? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Now let's join Caroline on her journey. I didn't plan to kiss him, but the moment his fingers brushed against my wrist, everything I thought I knew about right and wrong, about what was appropriate and what was not, simply blurred into an indistinct, shimmering haze. He wasn't mine to want. He wasn't even supposed to look at me like that, with that quiet intensity. But I stood there still and silent, as if my body, long starved of simple kindness, had made the decision long before my conscious mind could catch up. His voice was low, a steady, gentle murmur in the candlelight. "Tell me to stop, Caroline." I didn't, because I couldn't. Not when he was the only person who had looked at me in years like I was genuinely wanted, not just needed. Not when his eyes stayed on my face like he was carefully memorizing the way I was beautifully, terrifyingly, starting to break. The first time it happened, that unspoken connection, it felt like a complete and utter surrender. But I didn't know then that surrender can sometimes feel deceptively like safety. And safety, when it's wrapped in the quiet intimacy of a shared secret, can be just another kind of beautiful, dangerous trap. I was 40, living in a quiet house in a small university town in Vermont. The divorce from Mark had been final for 6 months. But it was only recently that the house began to feel truly, cavernously empty. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It echoed. The clink of a single plate in the sink seemed louder. The old furnace in the basement rattled on for longer. Even the sound of my own breathing felt intrusive, out of place. I started leaving lights on in rooms I wasn't using, just to create the illusion that someone else had recently passed through. The spare room upstairs had been empty since the day Mark packed his last box. At first, I kept the door firmly closed, as if that could contain the memories within its 4 walls. But eventually, it just became another square of unused hollow space in a house that was suddenly far too big for one person. Then came the ad. A simple listing posted online more out of a sudden impulse than any real intention. Furnished room, short-term lease. Quiet, respectful home. I didn't expect anyone to actually reply, but he did. His name was Liam, 26 years old, finishing his master's thesis in literature. He needed somewhere quiet to study and write until June. The day he moved in, I noticed his hands first. They weren't soft, but they were careful. The way he handled his 2 worn duffel bags and a box of books. He was polite, almost shy, carried only what he could manage in one trip, and said thank you like he genuinely meant it. We didn't talk much that first week, just exchanged quiet, brief nods in the hallway. The sound of his soft footsteps on the old wooden floors was a subtle, almost welcome presence. He kept to himself, headphones on, the cool glow of his laptop visible from under his closed door late at night. It was exactly what I had wanted. A quiet, unobtrusive presence. At least, that's what I thought I wanted. Until the night I passed his room and noticed his light was off, but the door, it was open just slightly. I hadn't meant to linger. His door was cracked open just enough to catch a fleeting glimpse inside. The faint, shadowed outline of him sitting cross-legged on the floor. A small desk lamp cast a soft, golden light across his face. He wasn't on his phone or watching anything on his laptop. He was just staring out the window at the moonlit trees. Still. Quiet, as if he'd forgotten the rest of the world existed for a minute. I should have kept walking. It was the polite right thing to do, but something about that profound stillness, that visible loneliness, pulled at me. Later that night, I found a single mug in the sink. Rinsed, but not washed. The next morning before I left for work, I left a sticky note on the kitchen counter. If you ever want real coffee, the good stuff is in the blue tin behind the tea. C. No signature necessary. I figured he was smart enough to know who C was. That afternoon he came into the kitchen while I was making dinner, barefoot, his feet silent on the worn floorboards. His voice was softer, gentler than I had expected. "Thanks for the tip," he said, holding up the blue tin with a small, appreciative smile. "You weren't kidding." "This is amazing." His smile caught me completely off guard, not just because it was warm and genuine, but because it made me realize how little I'd actually seen him up close. His eyes, I noticed for the first time, held something thoughtful, something deep. Like he was always observing, always processing, but rarely felt the need to speak his thoughts out loud. I laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse, and brushed it off. "Coffee is the one thing I refuse to compromise on." He nodded, taking a careful sip from his mug. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I get that." It was such a small, insignificant exchange, a moment that passed in under a minute. But for hours afterward, I kept replaying it in my mind, the way his voice had softened when he said thank you, how easily, how naturally we'd slipped into a brief, comfortable conversation. And when I passed his room that night, the door was still closed, but the light glowing from underneath it seemed somehow just a little bit warmer. Caroline and Liam's connection is starting so quietly, built on small gestures and unspoken feelings of loneliness. It's a powerful reminder of how deeply we crave simple, human connection. If this story is touching a chord with you, please give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a small act of kindness from a stranger completely change the feeling of your day? Let's see where these small moments lead for Caroline and Liam. It started small. I noticed he began taking his headphones off whenever I entered the kitchen. He never said much at first, but he would linger just a moment longer than necessary, waiting perhaps to see if I would be the one to speak first. I found myself moving slower on purpose when he was around. Wiping the counter again, even though it was already clean, rearranging the fruit in the bowl, tiny transparent excuses just to stay in the same room with him for a few extra moments. One night I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet again, the silence pressing in on me. I walked into the kitchen barefoot, wrapping my sweater tighter around my shoulders against the chill. The soft click of a cabinet opening startled me. He was already there. He turned, looking just as surprised as I felt. "Sorry," he whispered, his voice a low murmur in the dark. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," I said, my own voice quiet. "Couldn't sleep." He reached for a second mug without asking. "Chamomile?" he offered. It was nothing. It was everything. We sat at the small kitchen table, both of us with our hands wrapped around the warm ceramic cups. The old kitchen light buzzed faintly, a familiar, comforting sound overhead. He told me about a professor he admired, about the challenges of his thesis. I found myself telling him about the years I spent teaching English part-time at the local college, before my ex-husband Mark and I started our business. His eyes lit up with genuine interest. "You were a teacher?" I smiled, a brief, fleeting expression. Not long enough to call it a career, but long enough to know how to hold a room. He laughed softly, a warm, genuine sound that echoed pleasantly in the quiet kitchen. "Yeah," he said, looking at me. "I can see that." It shouldn't have made me blush, but it did. After he went back to his room, I sat there for a long while, my hands still wrapped around the now empty, lukewarm mug. The silence in the house wasn't so heavy anymore, but my chest was, not in a bad way. Just aware, acutely aware of him, of how close he had been, of how startlingly natural it had felt, and of how I hadn't, for even a second, wanted to pull away. The storm rolled in around 11 p.m. Thunder, low and rumbling in the distance. Rain tapping a gentle, hypnotic rhythm against the old window panes, making the whole house feel like it was taking a deep, collective exhale. I was curled up on the living room couch with a book I'd read before but couldn't seem to remember, its words blurring on the page. I wasn't really reading it. Then, total darkness. The lights flicked off with a soft, final pop. The low hum of the refrigerator disappeared. Silence, thick and instantaneous. "Power's out," Liam's voice called from down the hallway. "I noticed," I said, standing up, my heart beating a little faster. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway of the living room, holding the emergency flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Our eyes met in its soft, dancing glow, both of us a little amused, a little unsettled. "Guess we're stuck like this for a bit," he said. We gathered candles from a kitchen drawer, placing a few on the coffee table. The storm outside cracked louder now, closer. Liam sat on the floor, his back against the couch. I sat on the couch above him, my knees pulled to my chest, a heavy blanket wrapped around my shoulders. We didn't talk much. We just watched the candlelight dance and flicker across the walls, creating shifting, intimate shadows. It felt oddly, profoundly intimate, like we had both been pulled into a quiet, secret space that didn't exist until that very moment. At one point, he leaned back just slightly, his shoulder brushing against my shin. He didn't move away. Neither did I. I could feel the warmth of him, the quiet energy of him, and suddenly, the frantic beat of my own heart felt louder than the storm raging outside. "I haven't done this in years," I said quietly, the words surprising me even as I spoke them. "What?" he asked, his voice a low murmur. "Sit in the dark with someone." I paused, then added even more quietly, "Or let someone be this close." The admission hung in the air, vulnerable and true. Liam didn't answer right away. He just turned his head slightly. His cheek was now resting near my knee. He looked up at me, and in the flickering candlelight, I couldn't look away. I should have. I knew I should have, but I didn't. "I wasn't supposed to stay this long," he said suddenly, his voice barely above the crackle of the rain against the glass. I looked down at him, surprised by the unexpected confession. Liam's eyes didn't meet mine. He kept them fixed on the candle flame, the tiny, dancing light reflecting softly in his gaze. I told myself I'd just find somewhere temporary, a few weeks, maybe a month at most. But he hesitated, his fingers tracing the grain of the old hardwood floor. But then, this place, it felt different. His words weren't calculated or flirtatious. They were soft, searching, the kind of raw, honest words you only speak in the dark, when you think no one will hold them against you. I shifted slightly. My leg was now resting gently against his back, a quiet, deliberate contact, a choice. "Different how?" I asked gently. He glanced up at me then, as if checking to see if it was safe to articulate what he truly meant. "I don't know. Calmer, warmer, like I could finally think here without feeling like I was constantly behind, without feeling like I had to perform all the time." My throat tightened. I hadn't expected that answer. It made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't allowed myself to even want for a very long time. He leaned his head back again, this time resting it lightly, trustingly against my leg. "I've been carrying a lot," he added, his voice cracking just slightly on the last word. "Stuff I don't talk about. Family things. Pressure. I guess I didn't realize how heavy it all was until it finally got quiet. I didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing that felt honest, the only thing that felt right. I reached down, my fingers gently brushing through his thick, soft hair. A slow, almost instinctive motion, one that felt both deeply familiar, like a memory of comfort, and entirely, shockingly new. He closed his eyes, not out of sleepiness, but out of a quiet, profound surrender. I should have pulled my hand away. But I didn't. My fingers continued to move through his hair, slowly, carefully, as if I were afraid I might break something fragile and precious if I moved too fast. Liam stayed perfectly still, not saying a word. And for a long, breathless moment, the silence between us felt like a form of permission. Then he shifted. Not much. Just enough to lean more fully into the touch. Enough that I could feel the warmth of his body pressing gently, reassuringly, into my leg. My breath caught in my throat. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice a whisper without looking up. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did, and admitting it felt momentous. I nodded, a slow, deliberate movement in the dark. "Yeah." The word came out quieter than I meant it to, almost lost in the sound of the rain. But it was there. Real. He turned then, sitting up on his knees on the floor facing me. The candlelight flickered over his face, and I became acutely aware of how close we were. Inches, his knees were nearly touching mine. He didn't move forward. Neither did I. "I don't want to make this weird," he said, his voice earnest. "You haven't," I whispered back. "Not yet." We both laughed softly at that. It broke the tension, but only for a moment. Then it returned, deeper, more resonant than before. He reached out and gently rested his hand over mine where it lay on the couch. Not grabbing, not pulling. Just resting. As if he were testing the weight of this fragile, unspoken moment. Testing whether it would hold. It did. His thumb moved slightly, brushing over my knuckles in slow, absent-minded strokes. My skin tingled under the light, electrifying contact. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I let someone see me wanting, not pretending I was fine. Not hiding my loneliness behind polite smiles or busy distractions. Just letting it be. Letting him see. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. That would come later. Maybe. For now, it was simply the way our hands stayed together in the warm, flickering light. The comfortable silence that no longer felt awkward or empty. The palpable shift in the very air around us that said quietly, but with absolute clarity, something has changed. The house felt different in the morning. Not louder, not quieter, just shifted. The storm had passed. Sunlight broke through the clouds in slow golden beams that cut across the kitchen floor like they'd been waiting for a cue. I was already at the stove making coffee when Liam walked in. His hair was still a little messy from sleep. He wore the same shirt from the night before, but it didn't look out of place. It just made everything feel closer, more real. He smiled when he saw the coffee. "You beat me to it." I handed him a mug. "Habit." He nodded, then took a sip and leaned against the counter next to me. We stood there side by side for a long moment. Not touching, not speaking, but the space between us held a different, more significant weight now. I wanted to ask what last night meant, whether it meant anything at all, but I didn't. Instead I said, "Things feel different today." He glanced at me, his gaze careful. "They do. And that's not a bad thing," I added quickly, needing to say it. "Just something we should probably name, or at least acknowledge." Liam set down his mug and nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I've been thinking about that too." There was a pause, the kind that feels like it's trying to decide whether to close a door or open one even wider. Finally, he said, "I don't regret last night, Caroline." And I realized with a jolt that was both terrifying and exhilarating, I didn't either. But that didn't mean I wasn't afraid. That evening the house was quiet again, but not empty. I sat on the porch steps, wrapped in my favorite cardigan, a cup of warm tea warming my hands. The Vermont sunset stretched low over the trees, soft and slow, the kind of gentle, fading light that makes you think, makes you feel things deeper than you meant to. Liam stepped outside, barefoot again. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside me, hands tucked in his pockets, watching the light fade with me. Finally, he said, "I keep waiting for you to tell me this can't happen." I looked up at him. "What do you think I'm going to say?" He gave a small, almost boyish shrug, then sat down on the step beside me, resting his elbows on his knees. "I don't know, that I'm too young, that this is too complicated. That it was just one night, a power outage, a fluke." "It is complicated," I said gently, "and it wasn't just one night, not really." He turned to me then, his eyes steady and serious in the twilight. "So what do we do?" I smiled. Not because I had the answer, but because for the first time I finally didn't feel the desperate need to have one right away. "We go slow," I said. "We stay honest, and we don't pretend this isn't happening just because it doesn't fit neatly into some conventional little box." Liam nodded, a look of profound relief washing over his features. "I can do that," he said. A pause, and then, his voice full of a sincerity that made my heart ache in a good way, "I want to." The evening wind picked up slightly, brushing a strand of hair across my face. Liam reached out and gently tucked it back, his fingers grazing my cheek. The touch was small, fleeting, but it rooted something in me, something steady and real. "You're not a fling, Liam," I said, my voice barely audible. "You're not a mistake. You're here, and I see you." He didn't reply with words. He just leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. We stayed like that for a long while. Still. Quiet, surrounded by the soft, comforting hum of the evening. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself, to protect myself from the future. I just let it come. Caroline and Liam's story is a beautiful, tender exploration of what can happen when two lonely souls find an unexpected connection. It challenges our conventional ideas about relationships, about age, and about what should happen after a major life change like a divorce. Their story isn't about right or wrong, but about the courage to be honest, to go slow, and to honor a genuine emotional connection, even when it's complicated and doesn't fit into a neat box. It reminds us that sometimes the most healing thing in the world is simply to feel seen, truly seen, by another person. And that second chances for our hearts can come from the most unexpected places, at the most unexpected times. It's a powerful lesson in trusting our own feelings, in choosing honesty over pretense, and in having the courage to step onto an uncharted path, not knowing exactly where it leads, but being willing to find out. What are your thoughts on Caroline and Liam's developing connection? Do you believe that societal rules about relationships sometimes prevent us from finding genuine happiness? We would love to read your perspective in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on Uncharted Hearts. If this story of quiet hope and new beginnings resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and be sure to subscribe for more stories that navigate the beautiful complexities of the human heart. Until next time, may you have the courage to embrace the unexpected beginnings in your own life.